This video is sponsored by NordVPN. You ever go to watch a movie or stream a song, and hey, it's not available in your location, but then you look and it's available in other countries. For example, recently I was in the mood to watch Planet Terror again. So I go to Netflix and it's not available right now, but you know where it is available? Canada. With NordVPN's 5,400 plus servers in 59 countries, you have no borders. With just a click, you can look like you're anywhere in the world and consume region-locked media to your heart's content. So I go to NordVPN, I change my location to Canada, and oh, would you look at that? Play now. And now NordVPN has a new feature called Threat Protection. Threat Protection steps up your cybersecurity, rolling out first via NordVPN's desktop app. Once Threat Protection is on, it protects from malicious sites, downloads, trackers, and intrusive ads. And Threat Protection is constantly on the lookout regardless of whether or not you're actually connected to the VPN. Take control of your internet experience today with NordVPN. Right now, you can get a 2-year plan at a huge discount. And you get 4 additional months for free when you go to nordvpn.com/wang. It's risk-free with Nord's 30-day money-back guarantee. That's nordvpn.com/wang or click the link in the description below. On Monday, April 15, 2013, the US experienced one of the most infamous acts of terrorism in its history, as bombs went off during the annual Boston Marathon, killing 3 people and injuring 176 others. With all the confusion in these early moments and with the mainstream news being too slow to satisfy people's need for information, many people turned to social media. It was in these moments that a Redditor named Supernova Sky created a thread in r/news. The purpose of the thread was so that people could provide each other with live updates on the developing story. And he consistently updated the thread throughout the day, as would HG Manifold, who would make the subsequent news threads. People in the comments left resources for finding loved ones who were lost in the chaos, as well as advice for people to donate without getting scammed. And with so many people in attendance at the event, the thread quickly filled up with images and videos. And in general, these threads were very helpful for picking up the slack where the mainstream media simply couldn't fill people's need for information. Unrelated, these live threads are the best way to get news. Solid work, fellow Redditors. Incredible how these live threads are changing news dissemination. As soon as I saw it mentioned, I headed straight to Reddit. Same. Didn't bother trying any of the major news websites. But although the thread was a great help in gathering information quickly and was generally more accurate than the mainstream media reporting, time was passing and people were getting frustrated with the lack of suspects. Threads would sporadically pop up with people trying to do their own investigations, and eventually, on April 17th, a user named Oops777 created r/FindBostonBombers. Since this sort of thing could obviously get very out of hand very quickly, some rules were laid out. 1. We do not condone vigilante justice. 2. Do not post any personal information. 3. Any racism will not be tolerated. 4. Theories are welcome, but make sure you fact-check your sources. 5. Remember, we are only a subreddit. We must remember where helping ends and the job of professionals begins. 6. Do not make any images viral. Limit reposting images outside of this sub. 7. Finally, keep in mind that most or all of the suspects being discussed are, in all likelihood, innocent people and that they should be treated as innocent until they are proven guilty. These rules would very quickly become not so much a list of what not to do, but a guideline for what would actually happen. Over 3,000 people gathered in this subreddit and began to compile information. They were aggregating pictures, bringing in findings from 4chan and Twitter, listening to police scanners. And much of the initial amateur detective work revolved around a black backpack. And at this point, basically anybody that was seen wearing a black backpack became a suspect. Is that Curtis Axel? Obviously, a black backpack isn't that much to go off of. I mean, I own multiple backpacks that look like that backpack. People realized this, so other factors had to be taken into account, like people who ran away a little bit too quickly, or people who happened to be pictured not looking at the race at the point the picture was taken. Because, if there's one thing that Redditors are experts on, it's how people behave in real life. One of the biggest breakthroughs that happened was the discovery of a pair of men, one of which who had a backpack that looked like the backpack. He appeared in pictures both with and without the backpack, implying that he might have left it somewhere. Or, maybe he was just holding it in his hands for a multitude of possible reasons. But that was enough for people to start investigating these two a little bit more closely, but shit really hit the fan on the 18th. That was when the New York Post published this: Bagmen. Feds seek these two pictured at Boston Marathon. Now, there was absolutely no indication that the feds were looking for these men. Probably motivated by catching up to the internet and getting ahead of the other newspapers, they published this completely unverified story. And guess what? These were not the men. It turned out that the man in the blue track jacket was a 17-year-old named Salah Baroum, and he was with his friend Yassine Zaim. The boys were high school track runners who planned to run a part of the course, and their bags were full of their running gear. Neither of them had at any point been investigated by the feds, as the Post reported, and now they were afraid for their lives. Baroum in particular had been receiving hundreds of messages on social media regarding the bombing, and he was paranoid that people were watching him and reporting him to the police. And this instance was a very clear case of libel, and actually the boys would win a settlement against the Post a year later. In the meantime, hoping to reel in some of the wild speculation, the FBI released photos they had of the actual suspects. And although these pictures actually did wind up leading to the capture of one of the suspects, it also fueled more wild speculation. And at this point, there's some conflicting reports of what happened. One of the names that surfaced was Sunil Tripathi. To this day, many people swear that they heard that name on the police scanner, although none of the records of the police scanners from that night verify it. What other people point to, and what seems to actually be the beginning of this, is a post by a Boston native who remembered Sunil's story. Sunil Tripathi was a student at Brown University who had been undergoing severe bouts of depression. Coinciding with one of these episodes, Sunil had gone missing 1 month prior to the marathon. And throughout this month, his family had taken to YouTube and Facebook trying to get him to come home. After the name got in the mix in the investigation, a number of Redditors compared Sunil's pictures to the suspect's pictures, and yeah, they kinda did look alike. But having learned the lessons of the days prior, the mods of the subreddit did what they could to try and delete any mention of Sunil. But the moderation team was dwarfed by the mass of people in the subreddit, and they simply couldn't keep up with it. And then later on, at around midnight, it happens. Feeling the walls closing in, the suspects kill a cop at MIT and make a run for it. They steal a Mercedes, take the owner hostage, and plan to take a trip to Times Square to bomb that. This all culminates in a shootout with the police at Watertown, Massachusetts, leaving one of the suspects dead and the other in police custody. And throughout the night's events, Redditors were listening to police scanners trying to piece together what had actually happened. At this point, there were no names released, but people on Reddit who had been listening to the police scanners tried to piece it together. There was nothing concrete, it was all just speculation, but this would all go out the window at 2:43 a.m. It was at this time that a Redditor named Greg Hughes would tweet out that the suspects were confirmed to be Sunil Tripathi and a man named Mike Mulugeta, whose name had been mentioned on the police scanner earlier that night. And now, this is just some random guy on Twitter, no credentials, no reputation for being a reporter or anything like that, just some guy saying things on Twitter. There was absolutely no reason for anybody to take this at face value, but people from the press started to pick it up. It begins with an Emmy Award-winning news cameraman named Kevin Galliford, who had repeated Hughes' tweet. Then all of a sudden the names get picked up by people like Andrew Kaczynski of BuzzFeed, Luke Russert of NBC, Dylan Byers of Politico, Perez Hilton. One blue check mark after another repeats these names until they become so credible that they're basically a fact. But of course, as we know, these weren't the bombers. It wasn't long before the names of the Tsarnaev brothers were revealed, forcing Reddit and these journalists to eat crow. Apologies were issued and r/Find Boston Bombers was privated, all of which was probably of little consolation to Sunil Tripathi's family, who, on top of now trying to find their son, was now subject to endless harassment. Although the family did try to use the attention to signal boost the search for him. And r/Find Sunil Tripathi was created to try and channel this into something productive. But unfortunately, Sunil would be found dead a week later, floating in the Seekonk River. It's believed he had committed suicide before the events of the bombing. And it's easy to point to Reddit in this situation and say, yeah, look at these fucking idiots. But there's a few things you gotta consider. I mean, first of all, during this whole event, you do have the FBI asking the public for help identifying these people. And you have the Reddit mods doing their best to try and mitigate any witch hunts and misinformation, but at the end of the day, these are all anonymous people who can say anything really. If some random guy on Twitter just says some shit, it's common sense that you should take it with a grain of salt. I think a lot more responsibility falls on the shoulders of the people in the mainstream media who ran with these unverified stories. Consider that all these kinds of people, BuzzFeed, NBC, Politico, these are the kinds of sources that YouTube would label as an authoritative source. The kinds of sources that are believed to be more trustworthy than independent journalists. They're treated as if they're beholden to a higher standard than everyone else, that they have a higher degree of integrity, and yet, even with the lessons of the Boston bombing behind us, still fall for the fucking Sam Hyde shooter meme. But anyway, that's all for now. Thank you for watching me on Storyfire.
All I do is wait!